This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, and let me now talk about what we are going to do today and what exactly that we are kind of looking today and etc. So yesterday we have seen the basics of Docker. We've seen what exactly a Docker is and what does it do and what kind of a tool set is it and what is the advantage of going for containerization. And then we went ahead and did what? We firstly installed the Docker on our virtual machines, which is a Linux VM, installed it on our Linux VMs, and we have done some procedures out here. Like all these commands is something that we executed. We went ahead, we copied, pasted all these commands out here. So this is the project basically that I have given you all. This is the repository under which there are a couple of Docker commands to install it on a Linux virtual machine. So we went ahead and we installed all these things out, and we seen how to basically install Docker or install basically something known as a Docker engine on top of a Linux virtual machine. Then what we did after installation, the first command that we did is we pulled something known as an Nginx engine. We said, okay, fine, let's go ahead and pull this, virtual machine, or let's go ahead and pull this image out. Just a second, I'm using this. Okay, so we went ahead and pulled this image from something known as hub.docker.com, where we said that it's all the image repository. Like hub.docker.com will give you an image repository where you'll have like multiple images out here and you can pull all these images. Question is, which is good, which I basically went ahead and pulled my image. All that stuff is good. But let's say I have a .NET Core application. Can I create an image out of that .NET Core application? Meaning, if you go into, let's say, hub.docker.com, and if I, let's say, IIS, I have a Windows IIS server also where I can pull things out and I can do all that stuff, whatever I was doing with, let's say, the image. But let's imagine that this is not the case. Let's imagine that my developer is creating a code, is creating what a .NET code out here. Let's open my VS 2019 server and let's create a sample code out here. Okay, so you're a developer now. You're working in a team. You're not just testing it out. You're basically working with a developer who's giving you the code out here, who's giving you what the code out here, and this code basically is now being used, or this code basically you want to develop this code out, or you want to convert this code into an image and then test it out. Can I do that? So this is the requirement out here. So let's go ahead, pull up or create a new .NET Core code, and I'll say this is Docker sample application or Docker sample app. I'll say next. I'll say okay, fine, this is great. I'll create this out. I'll do what? I'll just go ahead and create this out. And this will create what a runnable application for me, meaning it's going to go ahead and give me an application out here. Now let's see what I'm going to do after this. Now let me firstly go ahead and kind of log into this virtual machine and install everything that I need while I'm creating the code. So guys, do you all follow what the requirement right now is? Do you all get what the requirement right now is? I have a custom code. Now it is not a sample image that I'm just pulling it out from the internet that someone has developed it. I want to now develop my own images. So how can I do that? Is the concept what we're looking at today. So let me go ahead into pages. Let me edit this page and say this is a Docker application and something like that. Let me open this up and let me say this is a Docker application, or welcome to the Docker application, and delete this out, which is good, and let me save this out. So just some editing out here. Your developer of course will go ahead your developer of course will go ahead and do a lot of stuff, a lot of things out here, but I am just putting in something like a sample out here. Now, in order to convert this code, or in order to, let's say, change this entire code into an image, you will need something known as a Docker file. As what? A Docker file. What will the Docker file give you, or what is the capability what Docker file would give you? Is that Docker file would contain a set of commands, a simple set of commands out here, which will go ahead and kind of create an image. It'll go ahead and do what? It'll just create an image out here. So this is what I want to configure today. And this is what I want to write today. And let me see how can I write, and let me understand what are the commands in that. So let me clear the screen out. And firstly, let me go into my virtual machine and kind of install everything out there. So let me do that in real quick minute, so that I have a Docker engine running upon this virtual machine. I'll say accept. I think it is test user. I'll give a password to it. And once I'm inside it, I'll just go into our repository what we've been using, and I'll say okay fine, let me go ahead and execute all these commands and install Docker here. So this is the first command, then this is the second command, and finally go ahead and install a Docker engine on top of this particular virtual machine and make this virtual machine kind of ready. This is what I'm trying to do right now. And once that's done, let's follow a protocol, or let's follow a procedure to see what is being done right now. Okay, so let me go ahead, let me install this out. I'll say yes. So I'm installing a transport layer, then I'm adding the Docker key out here so that everything is in place. And finally I'll go ahead and install Docker. I won't pull any image right now. So this is okay. So let's go ahead and take this out. And
the font size or the color, we are unable to view the
this one. So that again is like changing the settings, and let's say appearance. Let's say yeah, between the windows, it's not this one. Let me see, change the pointer. This is actually a bit of issue. Okay, fine. Let me kind of put it at 18. We say apply. This is okay. Sanjay, right? Is this okay, Sanjay?
Yes, yes. Yes, if possible, change the color. In the recording, sometimes not able to view this white and black.
Okay. Let's see if there is a color here. Let's see, this is default. Let's say font color and etc. This is fine. Western. Font style. This is one. Show more fonts. Now let's see where the color really is. Colors, yes, it's great. Cursor color, let me see. Default foreground is okay. This is how it is. Foreground and background color, isn't it? Okay, fine. Let me try this out. Okay, this is more darker. Let me say change setting color, modify this out, and let me come back again. And let me see if there's a way that I can change the font color as well. That's the font color. This is bold background, cursor text, cursor color, not cursor. I need something called font. Let me see if there's a font out here. Let's see, cyan bold. Right. No, font color is not coming out. It's a cursor color basically, which is this is taking out. Let me see. Let me see again. Let's see, where's setting? Change settings. bold fat. This is black. Let me try to see, take it in red or something like that. Is this okay? Is this
Better
okay,
will
Sanjay?
have black. Better
Sorry?
will have black only. Sorry for that. Better will have black only. Sorry for that.
Okay.
Now fonts is okay.
Font is okay, isn't it?
Hope yes, yes. Hope it is same for all, right?
Same for all, as in like,
No, I'm just asking other people.
okay, okay, okay.
Generally,
Okay, where did I change it? Let's see. Default background. Let's see. Modify. Let's do black. Say okay. Let's say apply. Okay, this is okay for better.
yeah, yeah. This is better. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so what was the last command that I put in? Let's see. Okay, this is great. So I basically went ahead and installed the save stable repository out here. And let me do an update. Take this out and let me go ahead and let's say do an update out here. And finally, let me go ahead and install the Docker. So installing the Docker, I'll say yes. And I finally have a Docker engine out here. Once it's done, I'll have a Docker engine, and let's go ahead and give a command called Docker version to see what kind of version of Docker is installed on my machine. So let's wait for this to get completed, and the Docker community edition is going ahead and getting installed on this machine. And once this is done, let's see what is the version of Docker that gets installed. And is everyone okay with the font, guys? The font size, the font color, everyone is okay with this? Everyone is comfortable with this?
Yes, looking good.
Okay, great. See what happened to this. Let's wait for a second. Okay, so this is done. So Docker is installed. So let me go ahead and clear my screen, and let me say Docker hyphen hyphen version. And this is the latest version, basically the latest build version of what the Docker is like, T20.10.9. This is the version what is installed. And let me see Docker image ls. Okay, I'll say sudo docker image ls. There is no image, there is nothing, like there is literally nothing. So we are starting from the scratch. There is no image, nothing out there as such. So what I'm going to do, let's come down to our code and let's see where is the folder in which my code is there. So let me open this out. I'll say do a right click and I'll say open file in the file explorer. And this is the application what I have right now. I'll say cmd, open the command prompt out here. I'll say .NET publish. Now what I am doing out here is that I am creating a runnable or an executable version of my application. Meaning I just want to go ahead and create all the DLLs out here. This is what I'm trying to do out now. So I'm going ahead and creating all the DLLs out here, and I'm seeing how the DLLs are getting created. So the DLLs have got created, and it's got created in this particular folder called C user something 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 in the publish folder out here. So if I open this out, inside the publish folder, this is the application what I'm looking at. Docker sample app.dll, which is, let's say, the main executable application that I basically went ahead and produced it. So what I did, I went ahead, basically did a .NET publish, and inside this particular folder, I now have, or inside this publish folder, I now have a publishable or an executable version of my application out here. Fine, good until here, guys. Any questions still here? Any questions still here, guys? Okay. Now what I'm going to do is that I want to make sure to copy everything inside this publish folder. I'll basically copy the entire publish folder from my local machine to the virtual machine that I'm on, to the virtual machine that has Docker. So what I'm going to do out here is go into the portal, take the IP of this virtual machine, do something known as a WinSCP. This is something that we did to do what? A file transfer, right? To do a FTP file transfer mechanism. I'll say no, I don't want this. Close. Let me see if it's letting me open the WinSCP without upgrading. Yes, it did. And I'll say give the host name, which is the VM, test user, and the password. I'll say yes, and it's now starting a session. Now I am inside the virtual machine. I am inside the home directory of the virtual machine that is running the Docker engine for me. Now what I'm going to do is let me copy the entire path on my local machine. Use this path and I'll say okay. Take the publish folder, drag and drop. What I'm doing right now is I'm just copying the entire publish folder that I have into my virtual machine. And what is this, guys? This publish folder is an executable version, meaning it's an executable version of my code, meaning my code is already in there and I just want to now I've just created an executable version of my code, and now I want to convert this entire code into something known as an image. How do I do it is the concept right now. So just going ahead and copying this out, and now after the copy is done, let's go into the virtual machine and see how it looks like, right? So once this is done, let's see this. And this is done. Once this is done, let me go into the machine and let me say dir directories. It says publish. There is a directory called publish. I'll say cd publish, meaning go into the publish directory. I'll say dir. I have all the files that I have just taken, and this is the main application that I'm looking at. Docker sample app.dll. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to introduce something known as a Docker file out here. It's a new file. We'll just say Docker. And this is something known as a Docker file. Where do I get this Docker file? It's very simple. You don't have to write the Docker file by your own self, meaning people do write a lot of Docker files and etc. But what I have done for the ease of convenience is that I went into the Docker documentation. I grabbed that particular Docker file. This is how it looks like. Let's see what exactly it's talking about. This is a very simple Docker file out here, which is telling that, you know what, please take the image called .NET Core 3.1 because the user is developing the application into something known as a .NET. Please go into the working directory of the Docker. Copy everything. Copy everything from, let's say, the publish folder into the Docker application folder. Expose a port called 80 on the Docker engine and declare an entry point, meaning I am telling this is a .NET application and here I am giving the actual application.dll, meaning in my case, if I go into the publish file out here, it is docker sample app.dll, right? I'm taking this out, I'm pasting it out here. This is called as an entry point declaration. So I am saying, okay, fine. In my case, this is docker sample.dll. In your case, the application can be a bit different. But let's say if you want to understand this more further, you basically want to see how this is written and all. Go into your Visual Studio. On the CS project file, do a right click. Just say add. Under add, just say docker support. This will give you a docker file. It will tell you what is the target operating system. In my case, it is Linux. I'll say OK. Now it's going to go ahead and create something known as a docker file for you. See, it's created a docker file for you, and I am just using a very simple version of the same file out here. I'm just using a very simple version of the same file out here. So let's understand the commands again. First command, it's giving a from. It's saying, you know what, from a base image, which is called .NET SDK 3.1, like the base image that is there in the Docker Hub, go ahead into and declare something known as a working directory, which is called / application, and copy everything. Copy all the contents. What are the contents you need to copy? You need to copy all the code, all the publish, everything that is there inside the publish folder. Please copy everything into something known as a / app into this particular working folder. Expose out port 80 because application should listen on a port, and declare something known as an entry point, meaning when the traffic comes in, what should be the actual application that you are giving it to it. This is what I am trying to create out here. And what I'll do is I'll save this out, and even the saving out here, right? I'll say this is a Docker file. This should be exactly the way this is, guys. No extensions, nothing. And save this out. So see, I have created something known as a Docker file in my VS Code, and I was only able to create it because I have an extension for Docker. I've installed an extension for Docker out here, and I went ahead and installed this out. So what I'm doing right now is I'll basically come back into my file, and I'll basically go into the directory where I pasted my file out here. So I'll basically go into this. I'll say this is PowerShell test 2. This is a Docker file that I'm looking at. So no extension, no text, nothing. I'll copy this entire file. I'll go into my publish directory on my local machine. I'll paste it exactly where my .dll is. I'll paste it exactly where my .dll file is. Now I'll go into the WinSCP again. I'll go into the WinSCP again, and let's do a refresh. And let's wait for the Docker file to kind of appear out here. Or this is inside the publish, right? So yes, inside the publish. Now I'll take this out. Inside the publish directory, I'll copy this file. So I've created something known as a lightweighted Docker file, and Docker file is going to give instructions to the Docker engine on how to build my image. And what kind of an instruction it's going to give you? It's firstly telling to go ahead into the Docker Hub and pull an image called .NET SDK 3.1. From that, go ahead, copy all the contents, expose something called the port 80, and declare something known as an entry point out here. This is exactly what it's trying to do. So what I'm going to do right now is I'll say, okay, fine. I don't remember the command. To be honest, I don't remember the command to build the image. So I am right now inside the publish folder, right? If I do a dir, I should have something known as a Docker file out here. Let's see, Docker file. This is my main file out here. Let's see, clear. Let's say clear, and I'm inside this particular directory called publish, where my Docker file, where my applications, everything are there. I'll say Docker image -- help. I don't know what is the command, so I say Docker image -- help, and it now gives me, okay, fine. You know what? You have a command called Docker image build, using which you can build your own images. So I'll again say, okay, fine, clear. I don't know how to use Docker image build. I'll say Docker image build hyphen hyphen help. It's now giving me a lot of options, telling that, you know what, there are so many options that you can actually give, and this is how you can go ahead and name your image and all that stuff. So I'll say, okay, fine, great. I understand what you're trying to talk about. I'll say clear. I'll say Docker image build hyphen t target. I'll say this is a Docker application, and where is your image? I'll say dot, meaning in this particular folder called publish, I have something known as a Docker file which has the instruction on how to build the image. So if I'm saying a dot in Linux, it's meaning the current directory, and in the current directory it's going to go ahead and look for something known as a Docker file out here. So it wants something known as a Docker file. So before I build this out, let me give a parameter called hyphen hyphen name, and I'll say test image, or let's say .NET image, or let's say same thing, the Docker application or something like this, Docker application. And let me try to build this out. Okay, it says hyphen if name is not available. Let me see again. Let me do a help, or let me take out that out. Okay, so let's see hyphen n. Do we have an hyphen n out here? It says target list, target string, and all that stuff. Okay, let me do this. Let me take out this name. Because that's not a valid parameter. Give a target out here. Okay, permission denied. Yes, I know why. Because I'm not logging in as a super user. So I'll say sudo docker build, and what it's doing right now is that after I give this command, it's going into the application, or it's going into that particular folder. And do you see this command, guys? From something something something. Where did it get this command from? From this file, right? Meaning it's going into the current directory, and inside that current directory it's looking out for something known as a Docker file. It's looking out for what? Looking out for something known as a Docker file which has instructions on how to build this image. See, each and every statement out here, firstly it said step 1. Step 1 out of the 6, it said okay fine, the step 1 is from this particular file or from this particular image, I need to extract it. Step 2 is that my working directory is something like this. Step 3 is that I should copy everything into that working directory and expose the port out, and then declare something known as an entry point out here. Now if I do a clear screen, and now if I say docker or sudo docker image ls docker image ls, do you now see I have an image out here? I have two images because this was pulled from the Docker Hub repository, and this is the application what I created with a tag called latest. Now if I say sudo docker run hyphen hyphen name and give a name for my container called docker container, and I'll say open up a port called hyphen p 80 80, run in a detached mode, and then give the name of the, or let's say give the target image out here, which is docker application. So I'll say docker application, tag is latest. Now what it did is that now it helped me create a container out here. I'll say sudo docker container ls. Now I have a container running on this particular port. Now if I go into my virtual machine, if I kind of open this out virtual machine out here and try to expose the port 80 of this, do you now see this, guys? Welcome to docker application, meaning this is something that we built, right? This is something that we went ahead and kind of built this, right? Meaning what did we do? We used as simple as something known as a docker file out here. We use that particular docker file in order to build the image. And let me also put the command here. So let's say command to build the image is this one. Like this is the same command. I'm just putting it in a different way. So it is sudo docker build -t, which is the target image. Let's say docker application, and let's do a dot out here. The dot here indicates that, you know what, in this particular directory you have something known as a docker file. Please go into the docker file. Please execute all these commands. One thing you'll have to be careful while executing this is that please change this to the DLL what you are creating. In my case, the DLL that I created after publishing was docker sample.dll. This is the DLL what I published here, and this is the DLL, or this is the image what I'm creating out here. And this is how I'm creating this out using something known as a docker file. And this is a manual procedure. Let's also see, you know, how do you do it in an Azure DevOps CI/CD pipeline and all that stuff. Let's also see that. But let's understand what a manual procedure really is before we go into that. Guys, is this process okay? Like, is there any confusion with this?
Once explain the last command.
This entry point or the build command?
Build.
So what
In
I'm
the
doing out
terminal.
here, yes, what I'm doing out here is that, sorry, not my terminal. I am going ahead and I am saying, you know what, I have an image, or I have something known as a docker file right now. I created a docker file right now. I mean, I have a docker file right now. Please go ahead into that particular docker file and create something known as an image out of it. The entire process is to create an image. This command is going to do sudo docker image build, meaning build an image -t target image, the name of the image, whatever that you can, you know, give here. Like my name was docker application, and I said dot. If I meaning dot, in this publish folder there is a file known as a docker file. There's a file which is called as a docker file out here. Go into the docker file, look for commands what you need to do, and it went ahead and executed all the commands what it had to do. It went ahead, it pulled the image, it did all that stuff. It firstly it went ahead and pulled a base image. This is a base image from which you can build your application, because for your application you need an image out here. So there's a base image. There's something called a base image which is called .NET Core SDK, pulled from Docker Hub. On top of that base image, you're copying entirely something called as $/app into the working directory, and on top of it you're adding your own things, like, you know what, this is the entry point and all that stuff. You're saying it is docker.dll, like whatever is your DLL which is running on top of it, and the entire thing is now a custom image, is now what, a custom image for you. And using this custom image you are now running a container. You're now what doing, you're running a container out of this. This answer your question, Akila?
Yeah, yes. And why you are giving the latest?
The tag, that's called a tag out here. So I am tagging my image with something called as a latest. In your case, what you can do is that you can say 1.0, version 2.0. When we were doing a software development lifecycle, right, we changed the versions from 1.0 and 2.0, right? How do you maintain those versions? Using something known as tags. So I can say it is v1.0, I can say it is v2.0, 3.0 and stuff like that. Any more questions with this, guys?
Yeah. We converted this to image. If you want to
Hmm.
modify the existing image, can we convert
Hmm.
back and modify?
Oh no, you cannot convert back an image again into DLL. So once you have an image, you can go ahead and create a new image and tag it in a different version and remove the earlier image. Like, but that reverse engineering is a bit difficult to achieve. You'll have to again, use a lot of things via editor and all that stuff and do that, which is not advisable at all. Going ahead and going into the image and delving into the image and convert and making a change into that is not suggestible, because image again is a DLL, right? It's a DLL out there. It's a workable unit. So that's the reason it's not suggested.
Basically, we should keep a copy of copy one, and then we need to keep on
Yeah, you can
increasing it.
modify it. I mean, you can modify any number of things out there.
Okay. And if there are some application which has interaction between SQL Server, like
Hmm.
backend data, so
Hmm.
that also can we convert it to image, or it will
Yes,
be
that
still?
also can be converted into image. That also can be converted into image. All you need to do is, like, wherever you are deploying it, you need to make sure to pass in the connection strings and all that stuff. So same applies to that as well.
Okay. So basically, this is OS, uh, which will not have dependency on OS, so we can run on this Docker.
Docker container, yes. So it doesn't have a
So
dependency on the underlying operating system because it has its own operating system right now.
okay, it will take the Linux CPU memory and storage resources, right?
Yes, yes. Container is going
If
to
you
run
have
on top of
multiple,
Linux. Hmm?
okay, if you have
Yeah, go ahead.
multiple images, so in that
Hmm.
case, if there is a resource crunch, so
Hmm.
how it will manage?
Scale up your virtual machine.
Okay,
The virtual machine on which you're
so
running this image on, scale it up.
okay, in real time, it will be physical machine, or it can be same as virtual machine
No, we don't do it on a
for
virtual
Docker
machine.
container.
Like, yes, for a container, we earlier used to do it on a virtual machine. But as a question that you asked is that if, let's say, you have multiple containers, and who's going to manage all these things out here? That's the reason you have something known as a Kubernetes cluster. So we'll run these containers on tops of something known as a Kubernetes cluster out there. I'll explain even that also. Does that answer your question, Sanjay?
Yes, thank you.
So if I'm understand correctly,
Hmm.
so we are configured in a single failure of point, right? So once the VM is down, all the containers will be go down. So
Yes, it'll go down. Yes.
in that case we are using Kubernetes clusters to I mean uh, uh, to
Manage
clusterize
the
them, right?
containers. Not only that, Kubernetes has a lot of advantages than a single virtual machine out here. But yes, a primary thing is yes, yes, you can use a Kubernetes in order to manage your containers and all that stuff. But let's look at that. Let's look into Kubernetes at a later point in time. But let's try to understand the individual images out here and individual containers out here, so that we get a good idea before we go into Kubernetes as such.
And one more thing, here
Hmm.
we don't have dependencies. If ASP .NET, for that
Hmm.
dependencies will be there. Right? In that case, how
Correct.
can we handle?
So exactly, see, the image is nothing but, or the container is nothing but a combination of all these things. When I created an image out here, I created a couple of things. I had the OS, I had on top of it dependencies, and on top of it, I am putting the application. I am stacking all these three things together. I'm calling it as a container. So even your dependencies are being validated out here. Meaning, when I did a .NET publish out there, .NET publish will first go restore all the dependencies and then do a publish. .NET publish is not a single command. It will go restore and then do it. So I am not only containerizing my application and the operating system, but I'm also considering my dependencies also. So I'm considering everything into the picture. So your container is itself a world inside it. You don't have to rely upon external dependencies right now. Does that answer your question, Sanjay?
And how about the security? For example, if it is OS, we have the
Hmm.
patching and all. If there is any attack, antivirus and all will be there. So
Hmm.
here,
Hmm.
how about
No,
security?
but this is running on top of a machine again, right? Like this is not running on individually on its own. It's running on top of an infrastructure. There you can put in all your patchings and etc. That will take care of things. So this container, right? It's running on an underlying virtual machine. You have a virtual machine underlying, whether it be a Windows or whether it be a Linux. You have an underlying virtual machine on top of which you're putting all these or throwing all these containers. So this is where my security part comes in. And this containers will kind of rely upon all these antiviruses, whatever it is, and they will kind of inherit them. So I'm not looking at a security at a container level. I'm looking security at an infrastructure layer. Does that answer your question, Sanjay?
Yep.
Okay, so I have an image now. Like if I do a Docker image, let's say, if I do a Docker image ls, I have an image and I also have a container which is running out of that image. Now, can I take this image? Can I store it somewhere? Because it's an important piece for me, right? Can I store it somewhere? Yes, you can store it in hub.docker.com, but that is a public repository. Since I am on Azure, can I store it on Azure? Can I store all these images on Azure? Yes, you can do that. For which you have an option or you have a thing called Azure Container Registry. For this exact purpose, you have a storage option called as an Azure Container Registry. So let me go ahead and create a container registry out here. And I'll say, okay, fine, this is the resource group Linux. I'll say this is a test container registry, something like this. Name should be unique. Name is unique dot Azure CR container registry dot IO. Input and output operations, of course. Basic. I'll just create something like review and create. That's it. So I'm not going to networking, not doing anything out here. Just creating a very simple container registry out here. And this will be created in no time. Once this is created, I will use my virtual machine or I will use the Linux machine in order to go ahead, log into Azure, log into the container, and then push my image into it. Now, how do I log into Azure? Is by using Azure CLI, and I'll do an AZ login. Now it says the command AZ is not found and can be installed using what? Sudo apt install Azure CLI, meaning it's telling you that what, on this machine I don't understand the AZ commands because you have not installed the command line installer out here, or you have not installed the CLI out here. Please go ahead and install one. This is something that we did in Terraform, right? We went ahead to Azure, we said Azure, we said the Azure CLI, we installed it on our local machine. Now what I'm going to do out here is that there's another set of commands out here. Come here inside the ACR install. This is again that I went ahead to the Docker documentation and kind of got this. Even this, before you install all these things out, just take this out. This is the first command that you need to do. Second command is put a stable repository. So see, this is like packages, Azure repos and all that stuff. Copying this out, pasting it out here. So very simple commands. I do not write these commands. It's already there in the Docker documentation. I'm just using this out. Update the package index. Okay, remove from this. Not a problem. Could not read. Let's see. Let's install this out. There is some issue, I think. Let's see a second. Let's see. main, this is good. From package index, why are you not able to do this? Okay, say entry one list something is CCLA component is not could be that could not be read and something like that. Let me try installing this out. Yeah, so there's some issue with this. While I kind of install this out, there was some basically issue with this particular command. Like there was something that I did not do probably. Let's see. So I basically did this. I did a curl. I did a setting up a stable repository, and I did, initially I did an AC login, right? So that kind of, screwed up my entire command somewhere. So not to worry. Like this VM right now, I cannot go ahead and undo this out right now. So that's going to take some while now to, let's say, uninstall all these packages and then give a fresh. But let me try this out. Let me try once again. Let me take this entire command. Let me see if this is working. Let me put up a stable repository out here. Okay, let me try to update the package indexing. Okay, the stable repository is in there, and let me try to do this. Yeah, now it's going to work. Some space or something kind of came up. Probably that was causing an issue. So this is done. Let me now go ahead and install or try to install this out. And now it's going ahead and installing all these things out here, or installing something known as a CLI installer. So what I am going to do out here after the installation of CLI is I'm going to go ahead and try logging into Azure. So before doing that, what I'll do is my container registry is created. This is how my container registry looks like. And to push images into this particular container registry, what I'm going to do is I'll go into access keys on the settings, and I'll say enable admin user. This is a step what we need to do so that the registry can be used. Meaning the registry now can be used out here. And now it has passwords and all that stuff. Now let's say if I come down and look at repositories. So I don't have a repository as such, so I don't have anything as such. So what I'm going to do is, like, firstly, after the package indexing is updated, let me go ahead and let me first do an AZ login. So that's the first thing that I'll do. I'll firstly log into my account, authenticate my own self. So this is done. So I'll say clear my screen and I'll say sudo AZ login. Now it's going to say, okay, fine. Please open up your browser and enter this particular code, R7BSJ, something like this. So let me open up my browser out here. Let me say this is microsoft.com/login device login. And let me say this is R7BSJ4RT, something like this. So let's see, R7BSJ 4RT2, 4RT and 2. Let me say next. And I'll say, okay, fine. I'll allow Azure to go in and log in with the CLI. So I'm doing a device login out here. I'll say, okay, fine. This is the account basically that I need. I'll say continue. And this should be logged in. It says logged in. And if I come down to my CLI browser out here, it'll take a second in order to understand this, and it'll basically log me in. So I'm logged into my account. It gives me the tenant ID and all that stuff. Now what I'm going to do is the second command that I'm going to use is, again, I've listed all these commands out here. After installing, you'll basically need to log in. And nextly, please go ahead, do a login into the container registry. Container registry for me is test container registry, something like this. So it's sudo ACR login, Azure Container Registry login, hyphen name, and paste this out. Now it's going to go ahead and log in into my container registry. Second thing what I'm going to do is, let's see what are the images that I have. So let's say sudo docker image ls. I have this particular image. I need to tag this image firstly. Important concept is that I need to tag this image. What I'll do is that I'll say sudo docker image tag and I'll say help. I want to understand what the command really is. So it says okay fine sudo source image the tag and the target image. What is the tag there? I'll say great. This is how I want it. I'll say the source image out here is docker application. It's docker application. Please type in the exact name. Tag is latest and the target image. Now in order to push it into the Azure Container Registry, I need to basically take the URL of this registry, which is this, which is a login server. I'll put it here and I'll say docker application latest. I'm doing what? I am tagging my image right now. And after I tag my image, right, if I do a sudo docker ls image ls, I have a couple of things. One, my image which is not tagged. Secondly, I have an image which is tagged with the Azure Container Registry. Meaning I'm making sure to tag the image in accordance with the repository where I'm pushing it into. Finally, I'll say sudo docker image push. I want to push this image into the Azure Container Registry. I don't want to type in the entire thing, or I can basically take this out and I can do Control C out here. Did a Control C. I can say that's it. So what I'm doing right now is I'm taking the image, whatever I basically put it on my local machine, tagged it with the repository on the Azure Container Registry, and then I am pushing this image into the Azure Container Registry so that this image can be saved where in the ACR. So what we did, we basically took the virtual machine. Into the virtual machine we installed something known as an Azure CLI, AZCLI. After installing AZCLI, I went ahead and did a docker image tag, and I made sure to tag the image in accordance with the Azure Container Registry that I have, and I put the image and then the tag here called latest. And then what I'm doing, I am pushing this image to the Azure Container Registry that I have created. All these commands again I have made sure, I think I made sure that I put here. So let's see. So installation, tag your repository, how you basically need to tag your basically your image, and then push. I said example name dot azure acr.io dot something. This example name should be replaced by the container registry that you have. Once this is done, and once I come down to the repository, do you now see I have an image? I now have a custom image that I have created on my machine, and I push this image to the Azure Container Registry. Now after I push the image, what do I need to do? The simple question is that where can I deploy this image as a container? Answer yes, Kubernetes. That's an advanced concept. Let's come down to that in a while. But for now, let's go into the resource group where I created this. I created it in network watcher RG. Let's create another resource called Azure Container Instance. This is a platform as a service, a very simple service which can, or let's say container instances, which is a very simple service which can host containers. That's the only thing it'll do. So I'll take this out and I'll say network HRRJ because that's where it is. So I'll say this is a test container or a test something like this container, and I'll basically say I won't use the quick start images. Now you have something known as a quick start images. I don't want to use that. I want to use the image that I have in my Azure Container Registry. And if you want to use this, what you need to do again, you need to go into the access key and enable something known as an administrator. And I'll say change. I'll just put in a very simple memory out here, like 1 GB, and review and create. What I am doing out here is that I'm creating a resource known as an Azure Container Instance out here, and I'm saying that what, the image that you need to take out is the image that I have in my Azure Container Registry. So what I've done out here diagrammatically is that from my Linux virtual machine, created an image, my custom image, push that image into something known as a container registry. So I had a VM, I had a Linux VM where I had the Docker engine running. So I installed Docker engine on this particular Linux VM. Using this particular Linux VM, I created something known as an image. My custom image. How do I did it? Again, I use something known as a concept known as a Docker file. This image was pushed into something known as an Azure Container Registry. I don't think I have a diagram for this out here. Let's see. Okay, fine. I pushed it into something known as an Azure Container Registry, ACR. And I am linking this ACR to something known as a container instance, ACI, Azure Container Instances, which will take this image, convert it into a container, and start using it. So now you do not have to basically take the headache of managing the underlying virtual machine, because the entire market today is going towards a platform as a service model, not as an infrastructure as a service model. So not using something like a virtual machine and installing Docker out here will help you achieve this out. So what I'm going to do out here is, like, this is the container instance that I've created. This is the public IP address of the container instance. Let me also see, go ahead into the containers, and it says, okay, fine, this is a container which is running, it's all good. And I can go ahead, take this IP, and click here, and I have the same thing out here again. I have the same application that is running, but now this is running out of a platform as a service hosted application. This can basically go ahead and host multiple containers also. Guys, is this okay? What we are trying to do, is this okay?
Yeah, but we are not open any ports. So how does that container instance know that the IT port is open?
You don't have to, because the container itself or the image itself is running on that particular port, and this is like a web application. It's by default, it is public. So since it has a public IP, right, you can basically go ahead and kind of do this. That's the reason I haven't opened any port out here.
Okay. So if you use different ports also, that will work, right?
Yes, it
Instead
will
of
work.
80.
Yes, it's gonna work. You can use 8080, or for SQL servers you can use 1433, or for MySQL you can use 3306. It will work. So now I've taken this out and deployed it. Then the question is, then why do we even want this virtual machine? We don't want this virtual machine, right? Like, where is my virtual machine? Like, this was a Linux virtual machine that I was working on. We don't even want this, right? I can go ahead and destroy this out. Then the question is, then how do I create the image? How do I push all these things? Because this is what I've used till now. How do you do it in a real world when you don't need this? Because this is an unnecessary use of all my resources. When I'm using something like an Azure container instance, this is unnecessary, waste of my resources, right? Then how do we do it? We use our Windows machines and we install Docker on top of the Windows machine. How do I do it? I have something known as a Docker desktop on my machine out here. Not sure why this is not opening out. Let's see. I have a Docker engine that is running on my machine, which is called a Docker desktop. This is a desktop application that I installed. And for installing this, I had to do a lot of things. Meaning, even if I install a Docker desktop out here, I still use a Linux kernel underline. I still use a Linux operating system. I still use an Ubuntu operating system underlying this. Hello?
Yeah, yeah.
Guys, are you able to hear me? I think there is some issue with my machine. It got crashed.
You're able to hear.
Okay, great. So I use something known as a Ubuntu basically that is installed underlying. Like I don't know what happened to this, but yes, I use something known as an Ubuntu operating system that is installed on top of Windows. So Docker very simply needs something like a Linux operating system in order to run on. And even if I use or even if I leverage something known as a Docker desktop out here, I am still going ahead and installing something known as a Linux kernel as such. So I'll also show you how to do this. Like I'll also show you how to basically install Docker desktop and all that stuff. We can try that. But today, please create your own image using a Docker file I have placed out here, and I've also placed the command out here on how to basically go ahead and build out your image. And this is not a capital S, this is the smallest like this because it's case sensitive. So please use this out and please let me know if you're facing any issues with this. Is this okay, guys? Any questions that I can take?
But have little confusion.
Sorry?
But have little confusion.
You'll have to do a bit of practice, Akila. This is the only way because Docker itself is confusing. Like I have also worked in a development environment, so I understand how the development kind of goes out. You need to have a little bit of development bent of mind in order to understand Docker because this is a developer's tool. This is something that a kind of a developer's tool out here. But for now, let's understand just this concept. That's it. Just try to understand this concepts out. And if there is any confusion still, I'll go ahead and explain this out again. Okay. Any more questions with this, guys? Anything at all? Please try doing this out. Please try practicing this out. And I've placed all these files out here so that it will be like a reference. Please don't copy this out. Please try to type it out and understand what it's trying to do and see each and every command what it's trying to do out here. Okay, that will make things much clearer. That will make that will make more sense out here. Okay, guys, if there are no further questions, then I'm going to close the session.
Kiran, can you share the link again, please? Can you share?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. Sure, I can do that. And I've also given this link, I think, on over WhatsApp to Akila. So Akila, can you please go ahead and place this link in the group chat that you guys are in, so that will help everyone.
Sure.
So, but I'll still go ahead and I don't know, my entire system got stuck. So yeah, let me go ahead and put this in. Yeah, this is the repository, Chandra. Okay, so please try doing this out. Please let me know if there is any issue that you're facing. Okay. Okay, thank you guys and have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.